Hi all, my name is Mahesh Veeratunga. This video is to support the students those who are following the postgraduate diploma in marketing at Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing, especially for students in stage 1 following the Discovering Marketing Essentials, the DME subject. This is the reference guide what we are using for this video series, the Principles of Marketing by Philip Kotler and the Gary Armstrong, and all the theories, the processes, the concepts, the models in this video series is taken from this textbook. In business, there are two major markets what we identified. One is the consumer market and the other one is the business market. Consumer market is the market where you and I sell product for the final consumption purpose, and the business market is the market where you and I sell products for another company. So the company is buying product to make money out of it, either directly or indirectly. So in this video, we'll be discussing about the consumer market, where the companies are selling for final consumption purpose, or the consumers are buying for their self-satisfaction and the satisfaction of the family members or the peers. So in this chapter, we'll be talking about the factors influencing the consumer buying, the key consumer buying decisions, and the macro model of the consumer buying, and whatever the things that are related to the consumer buying decision-making process. So we'll move forward with whatever the areas that are related to this chapter. As we discussed, the purpose of buying and the purpose of consumption are the two major factors that are considered to identify the two stock markets. So the consumer type customers basically we identified by looking at the purpose of buying as self-satisfaction and the satisfaction of the family members and the peers. And I mean, set of individuals or the household together those who buy products from the final service point or the retail points for their satisfaction we identified as a consumer market. Throughout this chapter we'll be discussing the entire process of the consumer buying and the satisfaction and as well as the consumption. You can see the consumer buying behavior model here, I mean, which is showing the stimulus response pattern in consumer buying. So, whatever the marketing environmental related stimuli are basically influencing the consumer buying decision. So, you can see the marketing related stimuli where the companies are implementing like the marketing communication strategies, the product development strategies, product related strategies, pricing strategies, the distribution strategies, like that, the marketing mix related strategies also influencing the buying decision. Those are the stimulus that are generating the creating the influence for the consumer buying. And at the same time, the environmental related factors such as the political scenarios, the technological perspectives, changes in the economic condition of the country, ecological environmental factors, or in summary, all macro and the micro environmental factors are simply influencing the consumer buying decision process. So, what happened with all these stimulus? The consumer start responding by selecting the products that they are expecting to satisfy the need what they have to fulfill. So in later slides, we'll be identifying whatever the other major factors that are influencing the consumer buying decisions, and also at the same time the consumer buying behavior process, the psychological process of the consumer buying behavior in coming slides. If I ask you a simple question, okay, let me know the factors that are influencing the buying decision. If you want to buy something, what are the factors that are influencing? You mostly come up with the factors that are related to the product, like the product quality, the product warranty, the brand name, the features, the you name whatever the factors that are related to the product. But there are many other factors other than the product related factors that are influencing your buying decision if you really analyze. Mostly the factors, let's say as example the cultural factors, the culture, the subculture, the social class what you are into is majorly influencing your buying decisions, the way you are thinking, the way you are behaving, your beliefs and your values that are combined with your cultural platforms. Let's say as example the food habit, maybe the fashion what you do, maybe that are directly related to the cultural platforms what you are into. So which means those factors are influencing your buying decision. So the social factors, the the group of people, those who are moving with, and the family members might influence your buying decision. And the status what you are maintaining in the society might influence your buying decision. Like that, the social factors also influence in the buying decision. So you, as example, you are one of the club members, so you need to comply the standards of that particular club or the society. So your buying decision is mostly based on the social members that are there in the club, or else when the group of friends, when you get together, um, your final decision in selecting the restaurant may be a collective decisions, no matter how much you like to visit a particular restaurant. But the group decision might influence your final purchase product or brand. And the other one we can identify it as the personal factors: your age, your gender, your income, your occupation, the life cycle stage, and all these things are the personal factors which might influence your buying decision. And at the same time, we see the psychological factors, your motivation, the way you get more yourself motivated will influence your buying decision and your learning. If you are the way you are knowledgeable on a particular thing will decide your buying decision. So similarly, the customer also same. If the customer is more knowledgeable on a particular thing, it might influence in their buying decision. And at the same time, the way they are being motivated will influence in selecting a particular brand or a product to fulfill their need gap. So, like that, we mainly identify four main areas which can be influence the consumer buying decision process. As factors that are influencing the consumer buying, we can summarize them: the cultural factors, the social factors, individual factors, as well as the psychological factors are these four main areas. So let's move on further to identify the consumer buying process and how the psychological process is basically working in selecting the final product to satisfy the need what you have identified. So let's look at further on the psychological factors that are influencing the buying decisions. The first one we can see as the motivational factor. Motivation means the goal-directed behavior what consumer is taking to achieve the or to fulfill the need. So the way he or she is being motivated, the selection of the product and the services will differ. And at the same time, we can think of the perception, the mental picture which is pasted towards something, we can identify it as the perception. If you have captured certain values in your mind towards something, let's say the product X, so based on that, your buying decision will uh, take place. And at the same time, your learning, we were discussing this earlier also, your learning will influence your buying decisions, the way you are knowledgeable, way you basically have an idea will finally influence your selection process, or or final selection of the product. And your belief, the descriptive thoughts what you have on something, we can identify it as the belief. And maybe food habits, maybe something related to your fashion, maybe whatever you might select based on the belief what you have. And attitude also influence. Finally, we can say the attitude also, which as a factor which might influence the behavior of the consumer buying. So we look at further how consumer buying process work from the problem recognition or the need recognition to the final purchase and the post-purchase evaluation, which we can identify it as the psychological process of the consumer buying. Uh, After this, in next slide. So far, we were talking about the consumer and the consumer market and the major factors that are influencing the consumer mind. So, with this slide, we will discuss the psychological process of consumer buying, which means the step-by-step approach the consumer is passing psychologically from need recognition to the final consumption of the product. So let's take an example and see. Now, if you have received a greeting card or rather invitation card from one of your friend for his or her wedding, so the first thing come into your mind, maybe sometimes the dress code, as example. So you identify a need of buying a proper dress for the function. So you will look at, so that is the need recognition stage, what we identified in the consumer buying process. Then to fulfill that particular need, you will search options that are available. You might look at various places where you can buy a proper dress for the function, and you might sometimes ask your friends, you might ask your peers about the products and the designs and the locations and the pricing. Sometimes you might go and meet a fashion designer to get a product done for you, since it's a very special location. So, which means you are searching information to find a solution for your existing need, find a better product or service for your existing need. And when you start finding whatever the information, you will come across more and more options. So by looking at whatever the options available in front of you, having considered along with the factors that are influencing your buying behavior, let's say as example, your cultural factors, your psychological factors, your personal factors, and all these things might influence the final decision of the product. So, third step of the psychological process of consumer buying we identified as the evaluation of alternatives. While evaluating these alternatives, all these factors might influence you for the final decision. So, once you have taken a final decision in buying something, then the next step is you automatically take the step to purchase the product, to buy the product. But the consumer buying do not stop from the purchasing point. This is one of the significant things that we need to identify as marketers. So the consumer buying process, the psychological process of consumer buying still continue even after purchase, which means consumers are evaluating their purchase decision even after they purchase the product. So that we identified as a post-purchase evaluation. So during this stage, sometimes he or she might be happy with the product he purchased. If he or she is not happy with the product, which means psychologically they are uncomfortable with the purchase decision that they have made. So that type of a situation we identified as a cognitive dissonance condition, which means psychological imbalance condition on the purchase decision what we have taken. So these steps are psychological steps. We don't do it purposely. These things are happening automatically. So that is why we identified them as the psychological steps of the consumer buying pattern, the buying process. So you being a marketer need to identify all these steps, because at the time of need, at the time of customer recognizing the need, you need to be there in the mindset of the consumer. When they search information, your visibility should be there in front of their information searching process. When they evaluate what are the alternatives in front of you, you should be competitively better than the other competitors available in the market, or in what are the options available in front of the customer. And at the same time, you have to bring kind of a convenient customer to make a final purchase in whatever the way. And finally, whatever the promises you have to maintain even after purchasing the product, which is one of the significant things in the consumer buying process. So the post-purchase evaluation is significantly important to get the customer back to your doorstep to buy a product, to shop to buy the product. So, as a marketer, you need to keep eye on all these steps, and you have to facilitate the customer with so much of information and products, the good quality products with attractive pricing as they are expecting to fulfill the customer need gap. So you can be competitive, you can be selected during this process. So we'll look at the different type of customers also, how they are taking buying decision along with the couple of slides that are coming up. consumers come across with many new products in the market daily. We being marketers, you being marketers, you release new introductions to the market, new products, new services to the market to be competitive in the industry. However, your each and every product will not be accepted immediately after you releasing the product to the market. So consumer when we really look at how the consumers are responding towards your new introduction to the market, we can identify that through the process called adoption process, how the consumers are basically getting awareness about your product and build interest towards your product and all these things. Are considered under this. So, taking one by one, we can look at the very first step of the adoption process, which means the process where the consumer responding to a new introduction to the market. So, the first step we can see as the awareness. Awareness is created through whatever the communication campaigns you carry out in the market. Advertising, sales promotions, the personal selling, or the communication mix elements you can consider in that. So, if you are to build a better awareness, you can manage your integrated marketing communication strategies, both conventional and the digital marketing communication strategies in modern context to build awareness. So with that awareness, the consumer the knowledge built and the consumer interest towards your product built. Interest will be sometimes either positively or negatively. It will be basically built with the awareness what you created. So with the interest, the people who have built interest towards your product will evaluate whatever the new introduction to the market along with the products that are available already in the market. I mean, the evaluation will take place in that case. Okay, whether the new product will be better than the existing product what they are right consuming right now. And next, rather going ahead with purchasing directly, so they might try the product. They might try the product by, I mean, way of getting sometimes sample units, or else maybe sometimes at the very first purchase, maybe with a smaller quantities. And once they're happy with their trial purchase, if they feel the product is serving the need, what they really expect, they might start consuming the product, what we identified as the adoption towards the product. So the psychology, this also kind of psychological process, and that we identified as the adoption process, the process which consumer passes through from the first hearing to the final purchase and the adoption of the product. So especially we can see this for new products that are coming into the market. Another behavior of consumer buying we can identify by looking at the two dimensions, namely the involvement of uh, buying as well as the perceived difference between the selected brands. So, by looking at these two dimensions, we identify sometimes the consumers are involving heavily in purchasing, heavily in buying decisions. Or in certain cases, we see very less involvement in buying decisions, and at the same time certain buying decisions are the significant difference between the brand are very high in the buying decisions, and at the same time sometimes we see the very less brand differentiation in in the buying decisions. So, by looking at these two dimensions, we can identify four different type of buying patterns, four different type of buying decisions, namely the complex buying behavior, the variety-seeking buying behavior, habitual buying behavior, and the distance reduction buying behavior. As an example, okay, if we really look at the complex buying behavior as an example, we can see okay your involvement is high, maybe the luxury products, the high value price products, maybe the technical involvement is high in these products, and even the perceived difference between the brand is also very significant, because um, your involvement is to identify the brand differences also. You rely your brand reliability, the credibility between the brand and the trust the brand which is created in the market place also might be considered. So like that, we identify uh, four four type of buying decisions based on these two dimensions, who call the involvement and the perceived brand different. So in this diagram, you can see the four type of buying decisions where you have to consider as a marketer, you have to consider when you're designing your strategies in getting your product into the buying or the selection process.